Handy thing, a bit of technology. It's far quicker and easier to swoop in and airlift someone than carrying them out across ground that's liable to turn an ankle. A similar case can be made for using a GPS when letterboxing. If you've got the luxury of a grid reference with your clue, or increasingly, what 3 words, locating boxes by GPS is much quicker, safer and easier. Quicker because it removes walking in circles, safer because you can plot routes that avoids tricky terrain, and easier because you're not as reliant on visibility or at the mercy of a subjective, cryptic clue some psychos concocted for their own twisted amusement. But enough sugarcoating. The fact of the matter is that letterboxing by GPS is a sure way to actually find boxes, and far quicker, often meaning the hunter bags more of the treasure they seek. This appeal seems obvious, because if you've tried letterboxing without a GPS, you'll know it can be bloody hard, and a box in hand is surely better than 2 in the gorse. When I started letterboxing, like many, I was keen to find as many boxes as I could, as quickly as I could, and soon bought a GPS to ease the process. But now I've danced my 100th box dance, quite spectacularly, and approach 1,000 stamps in my collection, I've begun to wonder if letterboxing should be quick and easy. Is there fun without challenge? And is using a GPS really in the spirit of letterboxing? Are GPSs a gizmo no-no? And dare I say it, isn't boxing by GPS a bit like, geocaching? One moment. Okay, sorry to take it to that extreme, but I had to stress the point. I think the point I'm trying to make, while likely offending most of the letterboxing community in the process, can be explained better than I ever could by little phrases that hold their place in our language, which may be small in length, but great in wisdom. The best things are hard to come by. Prospect is often better than possession. He is not poor who desires little, but he that desires much. A little wind kindles, much puts out the fire. Less is more. These may make you think, but I can't pretend rounding up phrases that suit my argument isn't bias. You could just as easily gather conflicting sayings that support use of GPS. For example, if the blind lead the blind, both shall fall into the ditch, which is actually scarily accurate. However, to justify my use of these phrases, I'll use one more, which is that there's no smoke without fire. At this point, you might be thinking, alright then, you ratty bugger, all high and mighty with your purist ideals about letterboxing in its truest form. What's the alternative? Well, I suppose that would probably be a shift back to letterboxing manually, with map, compass and clues. Because let's not forget, GPS wasn't publicly available until the late 80s, and people were letterboxing long before then. For those who may be new to the hobby, I feel it could be helpful at this point to illustrate the differences between hunting letterboxes by GPS and compass before diving any deeper into the ethics of the nichest of hobbies, where the only real conclusion to be found will be that clearly I have far too much free time to be overthinking such inconsequential matters and should probably get a life, or just go letterboxing. What's a grid reference then, and how does this work? Well, in short, some boffins at Ordnance Survey figured it would make sense to divide the UK up into chunks of 100 square kilometres, which could each be identified with corresponding letters and numbers. This is known as the National Grid Reference System. The square 100 kilometres on Dartmoor's OS Explorer map uses the letters SX, then 2 digits along the vertical and horizontal axes, called eastings, which ascend left to right, and northings, bottom to top. A 4-digit will correspond to a particular square kilometre, then each additional digit will divide the area by 10, meaning 6 figures corresponds to 100 square metres, 8 figures to 10 square metres, and 10 figures to 1 square metre. If your clue offers a grid reference, you can punch it into your GPS, let the satellites talk to each other, then they'll pinpoint you and your target's precise location, which is known more locally as Where East To. Let's use the Cranmere Pool letterbox as an example of how it can be located with a grid reference. The first 2 digits of the first 5 in the grid reference include the easting, 60. The first 2 digits of the second 5 in the grid reference include the northing, 85. This gives us 60000, 85000, which takes us to the bottom left-hand corner of Cranmere's host square kilometre. You can then divide the square by 10 to figure out the next 2 digits, which will then get you within 100 metres. 3 for the easting, 8 for the northing. The 4th and 5th digits could be added to narrow your search to 10 square metres, then 1 square metre, but it's hardly going to show up on this diagram. You then plonk your grid reference into your GPS, and it will not only point the way, but also tell you the distance. There are infinite better videos explaining this, and if you want to know how it works in relation to letterboxing, you can learn how in the Letterboxing Catalogue of Clues, which you can grab at any biannual letterboxing meet or online if you're clever. I'll include the link below to the main website below in the description. Now, hunting with compass is different. Tuck your tech away for emergencies and get your map and compass out. Immediately, you'll usually have to start learning the names of the tors and features around you to stand a chance of cracking a clue. As often, you'll need to get them to line up on bearings on your compass. Using triangulation, you try to get each bearing given in your clue to line up with its feature, and when they're as aligned as you can get them, you should be getting warm. But the compass is not without its quirks. In fact, if it wasn't hard enough already, no compass is the same, and it's possible for them to deviate, especially if, like me, you can't avoid getting a bubble. Some have fluid to steady the needle, some don't. Different sized base plates offer different detail, enabling some to sight to half a degree, but this is folly considering new compasses have an acceptable tolerance of plus or minus 2 degrees, meaning even the most accurate compasses could vary by up to 4 degrees, so you can probably begin to imagine the chaos this can cause when triangulating to narrow a search area. And that's before factoring in that Magnetic North goes walkies every year, so if you go looking for an older clue with just a compass, you'd better wear your luckiest socks. Take a quick look at this diagram. It illustrates the impact just 1 degree of deviation can have on a search area. Hopefully you can see the effect worsens the further you are from a subject. To combat this issue, generous clues will offer a few distant clues, then closer clues to narrow your search when you're in the right area, such as an interesting feature you might otherwise miss. A distinctive rock, a boundary marker, range post, gate, stile or tree. It could be anything, and people can be quite creative. I've seen rocks shaped like a sundial, a boot, a seahorse, Australia, and even an elephant's head. These clues often invite the boxer to look a little closer and connect with Dartmoor's detail, which could otherwise be missed if boxing by GPS alone. When I find a close clue, I often refer to this as the eureka moment, because you've hopefully just had the breakthrough that leads to discovery, and this can be just as exciting as finding the box. But enough about happiness and success. To illustrate further the joys of compass deviation and how this can impact triangulation, I thought I'd conduct a little experiment. Over time, I pounced on deals for 6 different second-hand sighting compasses. Some posh, some less posh, and one so ridiculous I couldn't say no to it. Next, I took the clutter of compasses to Raddick Hill. Why? Because it's approximately 3 kilometres due south of the Princetown Mast, the North Star of letterboxing, and I hoped 3 kilometres would be a far enough distance to demonstrate compass deviation, yet still close enough to capture in one frame. How wrong I was. For starters, the mast was hidden by low cloud on my arrival, which was already a pretty good advert for GPS, but luckily the mast peeked out of the cloud regularly enough to get on with the experiment. I started by using my favourite compass to get the mast to line up on 0, then I stuck a stick in the ground to mark this with a flag. I then took a grid reference. Next, I got the mast to line up on 0 degrees with the other 5 compasses, popped flags down and took grid references for each. My hope was the line of flags would fit into the frame of the camera, so I could take a photo with the mast towering behind, but even by 3 kilometres away, they were already too spread out to fit into one frame. Hopefully these videos illustrate the point clearly, how the slightest difference between compasses can have a significant impact on triangulation. We can look at the grid references to expand on this some more. Here they are plotted on a graph. Each square represents 10 metres. The distance between the two furthest compasses was 107 metres. That's over the length of 2 Olympic swimming pools. I'm going to ignore that the one on the western side was my favourite compass. Hopefully it's not the least accurate of the bunch. Interestingly, the compass on the furthest east side was the most expensive, so if it's fair to assume true north is somewhere in the middle of these readings, like some form of average, then price doesn't necessarily guarantee accuracy. Anyway, I'm no physicist, but I had fun with the experiment, even if it has sparked a few trust issues towards my favourite compass. Now we're hopefully up to speed with the differences between letterboxing by compass or GPS, it's time to find out a bit more about how the different approaches affect the experience. It's good to have an opinion, and I've certainly got one on the topic, but rather than getting on a soapbox, I was more interested in getting to know the opinions of the letterboxing community, because many can tell you what it was like before the advent of GPS and how its arrival changed the game. But this is easier said than done. I've had a few schemes now where I tried rousing community engagement for projects, such as a letterboxing World Cup, but this went down like a lead balloon. But I don't give up easily, and I've learned it only takes a stamp for boxes to take the bait. So along I went to the autumn meet with a better prepared balloon, helium this time, and before long, curious collectors drew near like moths to a flame and swapped their thoughts on the topic in exchange for the stamp. I was hoping to gain conflicting perspectives, and I wasn't disappointed. Here's a few paraphrased entries. As newcomers, we found GPS really helpful. We wouldn't be half as successful without it. As someone who travels 4 hours to reach them all, GPS is helpful for finding boxes when the mist is down. I started boxing in '78, and I'm an old-fashioned collector. I prefer using a sighting compass, as using a GPS offers no challenge, like geocaching. Some boxes have taken a few trips to find, which then becomes a satisfying achievement. GPS is an important part of not getting lost on the perilous moor. Embrace technology. Not everyone can find a box using the sun and a Maris Piper. Finding boxes pre-GPS was more friendly. There were more boxes around, and 6-figure grids made you hunt and plot more. The advent of GPS made it easier to find boxes and shortens time walking. GPS is the best of both worlds. 10 figs mean I'll find it, and find a lot in a day. I'm short of boxing time and don't want to revisit a box I couldn't find before, and the community is smaller than before, so getting hints is harder. If people want to do it old school, it's just a case of self-control. Use the clue and not the grid. GPS is quicker when life gets chaotic and doesn't require a clear day, but it doesn't require as much skill and it risks losing the heritage of the hobby. Some interesting perspectives from both camps there. It seems like the majority of boxers have embraced the GPS, but some are keen to preserve the old way, and most it seems are aware that GPS reduces the challenge, but not all consider this a negative. A big thanks to everyone who took time to offer their thoughts, and a big thanks to the following 2 boxers who kindly agreed to an interview with minimal arm twisting. Okay, so the question is, how do you feel using GPS in letterboxing affects the experience?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, actually. So I've been letterboxing now for, well, practically all my life. I'm 46 now, and I was 7 on my 7th birthday that I started letterboxing, and got bitten by the bug straight away, and it's never left me at all. And right from the word go, from as a 7-year-old, I learned how to read terrain, read the clues, read the compass, read the map, all the tools that the old school letterboxer requires. And it's really, really good grounding, I think, for a young person as well to be able to understand all these nuances. But the older I get, and certainly over the last 10 years, I've sort of appreciated the sort of slow insertion of modern technology into the practice of letterboxing. But it does change the experience. So I think I call it cheating. Okay, so GPS is cheating. That's exactly what I call it, letterboxing. Is it really cheating? I don't know. It depends how you use it. If you're going to use GPS and you are going to forego any clue, any compass bearing, you're just going to look on your map, know the area you're going to be in, and go straight to your phone and go and find it. I think that changes the experience a lot, and particularly if you're going to do that as an adult with a young kid like I was at 7, and show them that's what letterboxing is. I think you're taking away a huge amount of learning for them. but you're also taking away a huge amount of the experience, the fun. But you want them still to scavenge around and look for it and work out those clues and understand the map, the map references, and understand the compass bearings. And that's the whole experience, I think. So yeah, the bottom line is, when I look at myself as a 7-year-old, if I was a 7-year-old now starting letterboxing, I definitely would want the old school experience that will set me in great stead. But if you're rushing to get to the car, and you've only got half an hour, and you definitely want that letterbox, yeah, I think you can cheat.
So Rich, how was letterboxing before GPS, and what's it like now with GPS, and how does that affect the letterboxing experience?
Yeah, so I mean, back in the day before GPSs, I mean, it was all paper. So they were 4 figures. You were pleased if you had a 6-figure. You would spend the morning plotting things out on a map, putting little dots on your laminated maps and planning your routes. And you know, there was certainly a sense of achievement if you managed to find a 4-figure or a 6-figure grid reference back in the day. And yeah, I mean, that's just the way it was. There was no shortcut to finding a box. But I mean, I guess today you can take what you want from it. I personally prefer the 10-figure grid references myself. I'm time pressed. I have limited windows in which I can letterbox, and I would prefer to be able to letterbox quickly. And I think with the advent of GPSs, I'm able to put all my clues into the GPS. I take no paper with me. I take the catalogue as backup on very rare occasions when I remember it. And it just lets me find a lot more boxes. But, I mean, they don't all have 10 figures, and you still do have to go old school, and you still have to find the 4s and the 6s. And I guess if you really did like that traditional way, my view is you just ignore the fact that it has a 10-figure reference. You look at the clue and forget that somebody's told you exactly where it is, and you can still, I think, take away the same enjoyment from that, even in these days of GPSs. For me, it makes it more convenient and means I can find more letterboxes. And I think finding letterboxes is what I enjoy about letterboxing.
2 chaps who know what they're talking about. Thank you. It's an interesting point made that if people don't want to use a GPS, there's nobody making them. I'm going to wrap up now with my own thoughts on the matter. Now, usually when justifying matters of indulgence, I find myself using that old saying, everything in moderation, including moderation. And this is the approach I bring to letterboxing. I use GPS, particularly when collecting a charity walk, because it's nice to get the whole set in a day. But I do personally feel boxes found with GPS are 10 a penny, and even a dozen from a charity walk filed neatly in my scrapbook hold less value to me than a single old, rare or challenging box I've had to fight for. When I plan an outing, I'll often plot a few clues with grid references and a few without, depending on what I'm hunting for at the time and what's in the area. This way, I get the best of both, the satisfaction of cracking a tough clue and a few guaranteed boxes with grids to ensure I don't come home empty-handed. Ultimately, there's no right or wrong way to go about letterboxing. It's up to each boxer to decide how they want to play the game, and it really just depends on what they want out of the day. Some want the maximum number of stamps to swell their hoard. Others want maximum escapism to get lost in a Dartmoor riddle and connect with the magic of them all. It's each boxer's choice. The way I see it is that letterboxing is a game with different difficulty settings. Letterboxing with GPS is its easy mode. 6-figure grid references are normal mode, map and compass is hard mode, and cryptic clues are its nightmare mode. The different difficulty levels offer something for everyone, and variety is generally a good thing. If I could just change one thing though, is that the difficulty of the clue should be decided by the owner of the box. If they choose not to publish a grid reference in their clue, this should be respected, and grid references should not be shared by somebody who has found the box and recorded the grid reference. This would help to keep boxes with tougher clues brag-worthy trophies, and this form of cheating somewhat diminishes the challenge and sacred community formed between those who have cracked the clue fairly. But that's just me. It takes a lot to make a world, and at the end of the day, it's just a game. Speaking of which, if you've made it this far and fancy finding a box on hard mode, keep an eye out in the next catalogue email update or next year's catalogue for another new box. This one's called Compass vs GPS. You might need your lucky socks, and if you use an ill-gotten grid reference, I might have to set the piskies on you.